Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a UK political update, geopolitical update concerns spying. Our present government, our previous government, the Crown Prosecution Service, there's been this big story in the UK, which is very much a stick with which the press can beat our present government. And I'm not here just to kind of try and defend Keir Starmer and Labour, just because or whatever, but actually there's a lot of misinformation, possibly disinformation going around about this, and our press is so vehemently against our present government that they're using this as a stick to beat them, and I think that's unfairly so. So what's happened? Well, originally you had Christopher Berry and Christopher Cash, these two chaps, 30, Christopher Cash 30, Christopher Berry 33, and now have both denied violating the Official Secrets Act by providing information or documents that could be useful to an enemy and prejudicial to the safety of interests of the UK. And those are key phrases there. Charges related to alleged incidents between late 2021 and February 2023. Mr. Cash was a parliamentary researcher who worked with senior politicians from the Conservative Party with a focus on security and foreign affairs. He was linked to senior Tories, including previous Security Minister Tom Tugendhat and Alicia Kearns, who served as chair to the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee. Mr. Berry is reportedly an academic based in Oxfordshire who had taught in China since 2015. Okay, so these two were accused of doing spy stuff, if you like, back in 2021 to 2023. The best way to understand this, because essentially this comes down to like a 1911, the fact that the previous government had decided to prosecute these people on a 1911 Official Secrets Act is basically key to this case falling apart. Okay, so let's go through a timeline of what happened. December 28th, 2021 to 3rd of February 2023 is when the alleged offences took place. Then 13th of March 2023, Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry are arrested under the Official Secrets Act. Not a later 2023, possibly soft bit of legislation that would have resulted most probably in them being successfully prosecuted, but under a piece of legislation from 1911 that is probably not fit for purpose in the modern era, I would argue. Anyway, 13th of March 2023, the government's integrated review setting out its foreign and defence policy describes China, and this is key, as an epoch-defining challenge. The key is not an enemy. China is defined by the government at the time of these people doing these alleged crimes. China was described officially as an epoch-defining challenge. July 2023, a report by the Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee says China has penetrated, quote, every sector of the UK's economy. 22nd of April 2024, Cash and Berry are charged with espionage offences under the Official Secrets Act. So this is when the Conservative Party was still in government. And they charged these two under the Official Secrets Act and they were accused of gathering and providing information to China, prejudicial to the safety or interests of the state. On the 5th of July 2024, Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister after Labour win a landslide victory. 16th of July, the Court of Appeals in 2024 rules that an enemy under the Official Secrets Act is, quote, a country which represents a current threat to the national security of the UK. In other words, in order to prosecute these guys under the Official Secrets Act, China has to be seen as an enemy of the UK and a country which represents a current threat to the national security of the UK. And of course, when that's easy to say for Russia. And in fact, people have been prosecuted previously, the Bulgarians for spying for Russia, and Russia is very obviously seen as an enemy. We are very happy to say Russia are the enemy. We're less happy to say China is an enemy because actually we do an awful lot of economic transactions and deals with China, and that would be seen as somewhat controversial. 4th of October 2024, they plead not guilty at the Old Bailey, and on the 15th of September 2025, prosecutors drop charges against Cash and Berry. With a court hearing, the Crown Prosecution Service had determined the evidence it gathered did not meet the threshold to go to trial. They had been due to appear in Woolwich Crown Court from the 6th of October. Both men maintain their innocence. Okay, So that is what happened. Now I'm just going to dip into more of this article. They were accused of gathering and providing information prejudicial to the safety and interests of the state between December 2021 and February 23. Under the Official Secrets Act, anyone accused of spying can only be prosecuted if the information they passed on was useful to an enemy. Mr. Parkinson said in a letter last month that, quote, the case could no longer proceed to trial since the evidence no longer met the evidential test, adding that he could not go into the reasons why. But in the latest letter sent to MPs, he said he was taking the unusual step of sharing more details because, quote, government briefings have been provided commenting on the evidential situation. He said that he believed that, quote, the decision to charge this case in April 2024 was correct. So there's this belief that it was right to charge him under the Official Secrets Act in 2024, and that determination was correctly made then. But what happened since then is there's this other court case that acted as precedents that kind of raised the bar of evidence required for this court case. So the Bulgarian-Russian spy case. The need to describe China as a threat to national security in order to prosecute emerged during a separate case of 6 Bulgarian nationals, so here you go, who had been spying for Russia. They were found guilty under the Official Secrets Act earlier this year. The act says that a person is guilty of espionage if they act in a matter, quote, prejudicial to the safety or interests of the state and passed on information that might be, quote, directly or indirectly useful to an enemy. So this then set a legal precedence for the Cash and Berry case that was unable to be met. Mr. Parkinson has said that the case of the Bulgarian nationals clarified that an enemy under the terms of the Official Secret Act, quote, includes a country which represents at the time of the offence, a threat to the national security of the UK. And the problem is, at the time of the offence, the UK had brought out a label for China that kind of didn't meet the enemy threshold. That's how I would interpret this. This meant, quote, further evidence should be obtained from the government in order to proceed with the prosecution, but he added that the evidence was not forthcoming. Efforts to obtain the evidence were made over many months, but notwithstanding the fact that further witness statements were provided, none of these stated that at the time of the offence, China represented a threat to national security. And there's your problem. Now, there was a really interesting segment on LBC News last night where they got an expert to talk about this, and I want to bring this in because I think this is a really good synopsis and talks about how effectively you've got this dilemma of, like, if we prosecute these two people, then we designate China as an enemy and then we're in diplomatic hot water. It says nothing about whether these guys, nothing about what they actually did. This is all about how China is perceived and how it's labelled.
Elsewhere, the current government, Labour, have strongly rejected claims that the government was responsible for the collapse of a Chinese spying trial. The charges against Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry, who both denied the allegations, were dropped last month. Prosecutors say that was because the government has not labelled Beijing as a national security threat.
Now, you can argue about whether they should do that or not, but the simple reality here is that this is being used as a stick to beat the Labour government. Our newspapers are vehemently opposed, generally in the UK, to a Labour government. And, for example, the Daily Mail headline was "China given a free pass to spy on Britain." You had the Times and the Telegraph going to town as well on the government. Here we've got the Mail saying Labour secretly sabotaged Chinese spy trial after withdrawing star witness. Spy case collapse blamed on the UK government failure to label China as a threat. So that's a BBC there. And Sky News kind of saying it how it is, which is the blame game over China's spy trial collapse. Who is right and who is wrong? The collapse of the China spy trial has prompted much finger pointing between Downing Street, so the Labour government, the former Conservative government, and the Crown Prosecution Service. And I think there are elements of all responsible in this. But let's go back to the LBC segment.
There have been claims from the Conservatives that ministers have spiked the prosecution. We heard from Keir Starmer in India denying that claim.
The position is very clear that the trial would have had to take place on the basis of the situation as it was at the time under the previous Tory government. So whatever their position was the only position that could be presented at trial. So it wasn't, as it were, this government's position, it was the Tory government before's position.
Dr. Dan Lomas is a UK security and intelligence expert at Nottingham University.
Well, I think that the story is more about the intricacies of prosecutions under the Official Secrets Act and some of the wider problems of using that to prosecute aspects of espionage. And it's become something of a political football used by both sides, I think, to attack one another over legacies regarding attitudes towards China, which has been a problem both for the current Labour government, but also going back as far back as Boris Johnson and even Theresa May's Conservative administrations.
OK, so it's all a bit complicated then, but this does boil down, doesn't it, as to how much of a threat, how much of an enemy, perhaps, the UK regards China?
Yeah, and I think that if you speak to most individuals on the inside, and I think even most ministers, they will admit that China poses a threat or a challenge to UK national security. I think the issue in this case boils around the need under the 1911 Official Secrets Act to designate individuals providing information to a foreign state that is classed as an enemy of the UK. And I think it's around that term of defining a state as an enemy that this case rests on. Listeners may remember a few weeks or months ago there was the case of a number of Bulgarian nationals who had been spying for Russia, and in that case it was much easier to provide evidence that showed that Russia was an enemy of the UK. I think in this case, whilst many people acknowledge that China poses a threat to the UK, and heads of the intelligence agencies have also gone on record to say this, China is much more complicated than Russia because of the UK's economic and broader political ties to the PRC and the need to engage them in the international community. And I think that what you're seeing here is that tension, as always, between good national security and the interest to protect the UK's broader diplomatic and trading relations with another major power.
So, in essence, there's a bit of a compromise going on here, and the compromise is perhaps we might let some things go because we want to keep China, Beijing on side.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, a lot of people will focus on the security aspect of this, but, when you're in government, one of the problems is juggling issues like national security alongside broader issues regarding economic trade, diplomatic relationships, and the need to maintain cordial relations with what is at the heart of everything, despite what people think about the PRC. China remains a major global player, and therefore the UK continues to need to engage with it as a major power. I think there's always going to be potentially trade-offs. In this case, although the two individuals denied that they were spying for China, there was certainly enough evidence to charge them and potentially take this case through to prosecution. But in terms of kind of the broader dynamics, this, I think, is lower-hanging fruit when it comes to the scale of Chinese espionage against the UK.
You mentioned the Official Secrets Act. Is there scope for that perhaps to be updated?
Well, there is. I mean, there has been recognition that the UK's anti-espionage, anti-spying laws have been are outdated. The UK has had various iterations protecting classified information, going back to the Official Secrets Act of 1911, and in 2023, the UK government introduced the National Security Act, which was a new revised set of legal measures, legal restrictions designed to make the UK a hard target for foreign states, not just for spying, but to conduct sabotage and broader influence operations. And I think that one of the problems of this case is that it was the individuals concerned were arrested and charged under the Official Secrets Act. And I think that if they would have been charged under the latest iteration of the National Security Act, which which places the burden on the government to prove that individuals have been providing information to a foreign power. That is much easier to prove, and I think we might have seen a completely different outcome to this case if the current legislation had been used here. I think the government is in something of a catch-22 in that the individuals were charged under the old legislation rather than the National Security Act, and I think that the National Security Act is an untested piece of legislation that we are still looking to see tested, at least on the espionage case, within the courts.
Dr. Dan Lohman.
And there you go. I think that's broadly sums it up perfectly, which is that they probably shouldn't have been charged on the Official Secrets Act from 1911 by the previous Conservative government. But since they were, and with the Bulgarian spy case, moving the threshold for prosecution, upwards, that meant that this was unlikely to meet the threshold, considering the government at the time had already not labelled China as an enemy. And you can only go on what the government at the time of the prosecution, at the time of these crimes, thought of China. And it would have been better had the present Conservative government charged these two people on the 2023 Act, which is slightly different and would have more likely resulted in a prosecution. But they didn't. They went for the 1911 Act, and that, as you heard, put this present government, the Labour government, in a dilemma, in a bind. I don't even know that it's a dilemma. They're not going to win out of this, and so they look bad. I mean, if they had continued the case, they probably would have lost the case and then looked bad. I suppose it is a dilemma like that, or they pull the case and then they look bad. But I think that this was all set up really in 2024 in April, when they were prosecuted under the 1911 Official Secrets Act. Anyway, that's my understanding of how this has played out. I'm just going to read a little bit more, and it was worth noting as well. It is worth noting. I saw, I think he was MI5, maybe MI6 chap interviewed, former MI5 or 6, interviewed on the BBC. So that's domestic intelligence and foreign intelligence, MI5, MI6. And he was saying, look, we just need to be more honest, more open about this. China spy on us, we spy on them. We're all spying on each other, and these guys were caught. It's kind of like, we need to be more honest and say, yeah, they were spying. We all do it. Yeah, you got caught. We had you. And I guess that's maybe an understanding. You don't have to designate them as enemies, but the foreign state is an enemy. But just like, maybe this is a 2023 iteration that needs to be tested in court, that you are spying essentially on behalf of a foreign power, and that's that. In 2023, says the BBC, the head of MI5, Ken McCallum, said there had been a sustained campaign of Chinese espionage on a pretty epic scale. And a report by Parliament's Intelligence and Security Committee published in July 2023 said China had penetrated every sector of the UK's economy. Former chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee and former Attorney General Dominic Grieve, so he's a Conservative politician, told the BBC it seemed, quote, somebody just missed something, as at the time the prosecution comments there, quote, needed to be focused on whether China was going to be described as an enemy or not. So again, this is a Conservative politician, or then politician, he's not anymore, saying the government, which is his government, screwed up at the time. They didn't consider the designation of China as an enemy in the prosecution. He added, quote, it may matter less how you describe it in official government documents if you are prepared to put the evidence forward at a court case to explain why a country in fact constitutes an enemy status. My impression from reading what the DPP and from what Keir Starmer has said is that there simply seems to have been a muddle. When this case started, there was a failure to get to grips with what might be required to be proved in court. And I think that pretty much sums things up, and that's from a Conservative point of view. So that's my tuppence. I'm not trying to get the Labour Party or Labour government off the hook here, but what really annoys me is the prevalence at the moment of tabloid newspapers just being fast and loose with actually what's going on, and we need a technical understanding of why this took place, what happened, what it all means. And life is just more complicated than this government did that or the previous, although I do think the blame is more justifiably laid at the Conservatives here for prosecuting on the wrong legislation. That's where I think this went wrong, by and large. But yeah, I just get really frustrated at the state of British media at the moment, and then social media just jumps on this, and then you just have a complete misunderstanding of reality. Anyway, hopefully that was useful. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.